Good evening, everyone. My name is Gigi Chen Kuo, and I'm the Interim Chief Executive Officer for TransLink. Before we get started this evening, I'd like to acknowledge that we are presenting today from the traditional territories of the Lower Mainland Coast Salish peoples, where TransLink operates its services. We're joining you virtually from various locations throughout these traditional territories. The purpose of our call today is to provide current employees, former employees, and retirees of TransLink, Coast Mountain Bus Company, British Columbia Rapid Transit Company, West Coast Express, and Transit Police with an update on our recent cyber attack, the ongoing investigation into the incident, as well as how it impacts all of us. Even though some of you watching today may have received some of the information in other sessions or communications, our goal is to reach as broad an audience as possible and to ensure that you can hear directly from us about this incident. Today, you'll hear from TransLink's Chief Information Officer, Kurt Pregler. As well, we have with us by video recording, Danny Timmins. He's the National Cybersecurity Leader at MNP LLP, which is a large national business advisory firm. Danny is one of Canada's leading experts in cybersecurity, and we're grateful for his insights and his external perspective. As well, we have Timothy Walsh, who is the Vice President of Breach and Cyber Risk Solutions at TransUnion. And Timothy will explain the options and benefits of the 2-year credit monitoring service package that's being offered by TransLink. We also have with us today representatives from the leadership teams of TransLink, Coast Mountain Bus Company, BC Rapid Transit Company, and Transit Police on the call today, including CMBC President and General Manager Mike McDaniel, BC RTC President and General Manager Michelle Ladrac, Transit Police Chief Officer Dave Jones, TransLink's Interim General Counsel and Corporate Secretary Jennifer Breeze, TransLink's Vice President of Human Resources Annabelle Donovan, and TransLink's Chief Information Officer Kurt Pregler, whom you will hear from momentarily. Now, we know many of you have questions and concerns related to the cyber attack. When we first announced the 2 info sessions earlier last week, we asked you to send us your questions using an anonymous form. And we did receive many submissions, which help us shape today's program and speaking remarks. We've also set aside time at the end of today's program to respond to some of the questions you've submitted, and we'll try to get to as many as we can during this call. Tomorrow, we will share updated frequently asked questions on TransLink's website and your organization's employee SharePoint site, and we'll post a full recording of this event at translink.ca/cyber incident. Now, at this point, I'd like to turn things over to CMBC President Mike McDaniel just to say a few words.
Thank you, Gigi. Good evening, everyone. This meeting is being held in an effort to communicate in a way that reaches as many of you as possible. I'm grateful that this virtual platform gives a greater opportunity to share information with a wider audience than our usual channels. And today, this is the first time it's being used in this way. I do wish it was under better circumstances, of course. What was also important was to hold 2 meetings, one earlier today and one this evening, this meeting, to reflect that many employees at all operating companies, CMBC, BCRTC, West Coast Express, and Transit Police, do not work a 9-to-5 schedule. So to all of you on the call, I would like to say thank you for taking the time to join us this evening for this very special information. And now back to you, Gigi.
Thanks, Mike. So in late 2020, TransLink was the victim of a sophisticated cyber attack. And during this incident, criminals breached our organization's computer network and illegally accessed certain files. We are taking this incident very seriously, and we're actively dealing with it still today. Once the threat was first detected, we took swift and decisive steps to shut down nearly all of our computing systems in order to contain the threat. We also immediately launched an investigation with the assistance of third-party cyber experts as well as law enforcement agencies to help investigate the attack and determine exactly what information was accessed. This investigation is a difficult, arduous, and painstaking process. It started when we became aware of the attack and will continue over the next few months. Many individuals across our enterprise, particularly on the IT team, have worked through holidays, weekends, and at all hours of the night in order to support this ongoing investigation. When our investigation discovered that the criminals had accessed a restricted folder related to payroll administration, and that folder contained sensitive personal information, we responded quickly to alert and notify the affected individuals. Now, since we're working to share information with you while the investigation is still ongoing, we may not be able to answer all of your questions. And it's possible that we'll learn more as the investigation continues over the coming weeks. If further information comes to light about unlawful access to personal information, anyone impacted will be notified in writing. From what we've learned so far, the victims of this crime include many of us on this call today, employees, some former and retired employees, and a limited number of spouses of TransLink and its subsidiaries. In fact, I'm pretty sure some of the colleagues I used to work alongside with over the years at Airport Square, Gateway, Metrotown, and Saperton are on this call today. Now, last week, notification letters started to arrive in the mail. For those of you who received a letter, I know you're concerned about how this will affect you, and I want you to know that we are all feeling the same way. I received my own notification letter a few days ago, informing me that my social insurance number, date of birth, home address, and bank account number had all been unlawfully accessed. And even though I've been closely connected with responding to this incident since it was first detected in December, it was still jarring to hold the letter in my hands. Now, we did issue letters to every individual that we currently know have had their sensitive personal information unlawfully accessed through this incident. And the letters explain exactly what information was accessed for that person. The letter also contains important information on how to register for 2 years of credit monitoring, fraud alert, and dark web monitoring through TransUnion. Our external cyber experts have been monitoring the internet, and at this time, they don't think that any of our stolen data has yet been published on the internet. Unfortunately, we still need to be aware that the data could be published at any time or sold, so we need to take the necessary precautions. And so far, we've worked to share with you as much information as we can about unlawful access to personal information, and as quickly as we can, given the ongoing investigation, and we're doing our best to be transparent as the investigation continues. Unfortunately, this investigation is a very time-consuming process, and it's going to be some time before we can confirm exactly what and whose information was or was not unlawfully accessed by the attackers. I also want to explain why TransLink is contacting you about this incident when you are employees or former employees of other companies, including Coast Mountain Bus Company, BC Rapid Transit Company, West Coast Express, or Transit Police. Some employees have asked us about this directly. The answer is that TransLink provides payroll and benefit services for Coast Mountain Bus Company, payroll services for Transit Police, benefit services for BC Rapid Transit Company and West Coast Express, just like an outside service provider to your employer. Also, because this attack was on TransLink's IT systems, we feel it's TransLink's responsibility to communicate with you directly about it. We know that many of you are upset or worried as a result of this cyber attack, and our team has read every one of your emails and the questions you've submitted, and we have compiled answers which we will address during this call or include in our FAQs. Now, at this time, I'd like to turn things over to the next speaker, TransLink's Chief Information Officer, Kurt Pregler, who will explain in more detail about the cyber attack and exactly what happened. Over to you, Kurt.
Thank you, Gigi, and good evening, everyone. As Gigi mentioned, my name is Kurt Pregler, and I'm TransLink's Chief Information Officer. I oversee the Business Technology Services Division, and we're the division that has been responding to the incident and working to restore our IT network. Today, I would like to share just a little more detail with you about exactly what happened and the nature of the cyber attack. So let's start at the beginning. This cyber attack began when one of our employees opened a phishing email. Unfortunately, this malicious email opened the door for a sophisticated form of ransomware to enter our network. As soon as our team detected the ransomware, we took immediate steps to isolate and shut down key IT assets and systems. This was done to contain the threat and reduce the impact on TransLink's operations and infrastructure. We took those decisive steps in early December and have been working around the clock over the last 3 months to completely scrub our systems and remove any trace of the ransomware. At the same time, my team has also been working with third-party investigators as they have worked to piece together exactly what folders, what files, and what information were accessed by the cyber criminals after they breached our security. It's an ongoing challenge to protect against cyber attacks because things evolve and adapt so quickly. In addition, cyber attacks are increasing across the globe as criminals are trying to take advantage of the pandemic and so many of our employees working remotely. Since the start of the pandemic, TransLink has seen a 261% increase in spam emails and a 383% increase in IT security investigations that my team has had to personally undertake to make sure that we're taking all the necessary actions we need to address them. To those of us working in IT, we are constantly trying to keep up with the latest cyber threats. In this case, we fell victim to a very new form of ransomware called eGregor. It emerged in late 2020 and quickly claimed several high-profile victims in only a matter of months. These included international bookstore Barnes & Noble, major retailer Kmart, and most regrettably, TransLink. Many of you have asked us how something like this could happen to an organization like ours. Allow me to clarify what actions we have taken in recent years to try to prevent this type of incident from occurring. Our cybersecurity program has been a top priority for the TransLink enterprise for many years. In recent years, we have continued to expand the program and invest in new systems and practices. We've developed multi-year strategies and roadmaps for investing in cybersecurity, IT infrastructure, and software. We've also conducted regular studies, audits, and exercises such as our annual maturity assessments, penetration tests, and compliance audits. But because cybersecurity is a constantly moving target, we need to reevaluate our objectives and targets every year. To do that, we work with an external review partner to update our plans, our policies, and our standards on an annual basis. This is in order to ensure we're doing as much as possible to stay ahead of the curve. All these investments and initiatives are done in addition to our annual awareness campaigns and the mandatory IT security awareness training and exercises for all employees. Many of you on the call today will recall that this past summer, employees who have corporate email accounts had to complete cybersecurity training focused specifically on how to spot a phishing email, something we require to be done every year. Yet despite all the employee training, all the investments, and all the strategies we had in place, this novel and sophisticated attack still occurred. Once the attackers were able to gain access to our system through that calculated phishing email, they were able to deploy a very sophisticated ransomware attack that spread rapidly. Let me tell you a little bit about this information that we now know is accessed as part of this ongoing investigation. The one folder that gave rise to the letters that have been sent to everybody is a restricted payroll working folder. This folder we're referring to is not the PeopleSoft server itself, where we store information, but it is a folder made up of subfolders and files that have been created for different reasons. For example, a file may have information that includes calculations about someone's vacation. Another file may have information about T4s. That is why the information accessed may differ from person to person. And that is part of why those of you who have been impacted have or will receive a personalized letter noting exactly what information we currently know has been accessed for you. It is important to note that even though BCRTC payroll is conducted by BCRTC employees and using BCRTC systems, there are times when information is required to administer benefits or address employees who have moved between organizations. That is why some BCRTC employees have also received those notifications. The information in the folder was collected and used for business purposes and is a normal part of doing business. I know that many of you have asked why the personal information in our payroll and benefits system was not encrypted. The answer is that while encryption is one method for protecting information, other controls can and have been put in place to offer appropriate protection. In this case, access to the drives was restricted to only the employees who required it for legitimate operational purposes, with strong identity management in place to protect that. As part of our investigation and remediation efforts, we are going to continue to look for any opportunities to further strengthen and improve both our physical and our technical security measures. Even though we have several security measures in place to protect our systems and data, unfortunately, due to how the cyber attack was executed, data encryption would not have prevented the attackers from breaking through in this case. Prior to this attack, we had several security projects that were planned to begin this year. We will continue to pursue those projects, and we will also be making additional investments as well. Those are being made in order to further strengthen our safeguards and protect the security and the confidentiality of personal information. I can tell you that we have already begun to review our existing policies, our practices, our training programs, and physical and technical security measures following this event. We are deeply committed to rebuilding trust with all of you. I am pleased to report that we recently achieved containment of the ransomware and are now continuing to work on restoring all of our systems and services, as well as resuming normal operations as quickly and safely as possible. In the months ahead, we're going to continue to work closely with the Office of the Information and Privacy Commissioner for BC, as well as law enforcement agencies as they investigate this incident. We are also committed to providing regular updates for all of you through our cyber incident webpage, which you can access at translink.ca/cyber incident. With that, I'd like to thank you for your time this evening and turn it back to you, Gigi.
Thank you, Kurt. You briefly touched on the impact on BCRTC employees in your remarks. I'd like to invite BCRTC President Michelle Ledrac to say a few words at this time.
Thank you, Gigi, and good evening, everyone. We've received quite a few questions from BCRTC and West Coast Express people wondering why they were notified after employees of TransLink and CNBC and Transit Police had been notified. Well, initially we believed that our employees may not have been affected by the breach. Unfortunately, that ultimately was not the case for some of our employees. And I really want to let you all know that you were notified very shortly after I learned that BCRTC and West Coast Express employees were affected by this incident, almost immediately after I knew. As both Mike and Gigi have said, our top priority is still to communicate the information as quickly as we can with all of you, as you can expect. If we learn more, I will continue to update you all through my weekly From the Desk Off. And we will also continue to regularly update BCRTC's employee SharePoint site as new information becomes available. So thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Michelle. As mentioned at the beginning of our session, we have invited one of Canada's leading cybersecurity experts to join us for today's call to share an external perspective as well as some practical tips on what we can all do to protect ourselves in the wake of this cyber attack. So we'll now share a short pre-recorded video that Danny has shared with us.
Hi, my name is Danny Timmons. I'm the National Cybersecurity Leader with MMP. I've been in the information technology business for the last 30 years and in cybersecurity for the last 20 years. I met a team member from TransLink at a keynote that I was doing for the Vancouver Board of Trade a few years ago, talking about cybersecurity, and they asked me to come on and talk about cybersecurity today. I'm not providing any services or involved with TransLink today. So I just wanted to kind of recap the unfortunate situation that happened. TransLink was the unfortunate victim to a cyber crime recently, and it affected employees, former employees, and retirees. My goal today is to speak about the global impact, the trends globally in and around Canada, and what has happening in the cybersecurity world, and provide a few tips for you that hopefully will lessen the risk of possibly being a victim. So when organizations have a cyber breach of personal information, things like addresses, bank information, credit card information taken, the adversary who took that information will usually sell that information on the dark web. Then other criminals will buy that information to target those people that they just bought with that information that was stolen, to either create a situation of fraud or cyber fraud. I know that TransLink has provided credit monitoring and dark web monitoring, which I would advise that each of you use. Nothing is perfect, but this will give you a leg up to likely know if something has changed within your personal finances and credit. I wanted to talk a little bit about cybersecurity from a global perspective. A really important report comes out each year. It's called the Global Risk Report by the World Economic Forum. And it states that the likelihood of a cyber attack in 2019 was 5th behind natural disasters and extreme weather. And there was a couple more. But just to give you a sense of what's happening in the world around cyber. The Canadian government had a nice quotation. It was around COVID-19, the scams and the frauds and the misleading claims that were happening. It said the cumulative volume of coronavirus-related emails and threats is the largest collection of attack types exploiting a single theme for years and possibly forever. Just to give you an idea, when cyber criminals focus on something, they typically, like this COVID situation that happened, they will exploit that as much as they can. Here's another one. Global cybercrime damages predicted to cost up $6 trillion annually by 2021, which it is 2021. So this was taken in December, to give you an example. $6 trillion, none of us can really even comprehend that. There were 144 million new malware samples in 2019, and about the same will happen in likelihood in 2020 and 21. And those numbers aren't out yet. But to give you an example, so malware, if you're not familiar with malware, malware is like a virus. So everybody typically knows what a computer virus is. Malware is like version 0.2 of that virus. And so it's just more complicated, more sophisticated, and can do a lot more. Just to give you 144 million new samples in 2019, and I'm sure it's probably the same thing in 2020, and will be the same thing in 2021. Almost 50% of business PCs and 53% of consumer PCs that got infected once were reinfected within the same year, meaning that the likelihood is people aren't doing the right things to clean their systems or make sure that they're not going to get infected. Those are pretty staggering numbers. Malicious hackers are now attacking computers and networks at a rate of 1 attack every 39 seconds. So just to give you an example, it's just happening so fast and can happen to anybody. 75% of consumers now limit the amount of personal information they share online. That's an important stat. I'm going to talk a little bit about that one when I give you some recommendations and tips. So I would also recommend that you consider some of the following tips, not necessarily connected to the TransLink breach or incident, but definitely can be helpful for you in lessening your risk around cyber. So number one, change your passwords. Make them more complex in nature, adding numbers and characters. Try to keep them to about 12 if you can. That's the magic number for us. We like for people to keep them at 12, but we know that might seem long. What we ask people to do is create a phrase that you can remember really easily. So I love ice cream. I love my kids. And inside of there, you would put in different characters and different numbers. Now, there's also an option to add a password keeper to your system. Now, the password keeper is great because it can also create for you complex passwords, but also keep those passwords on your system. And it's a useful tool if you so choose it. Now, passwords are really important. And you should always be changing your password, especially if you're feeling something's not right. Just change all the passwords. Why? Because if your password is compromised on an application out there, as unfortunately happened with TransLink in the sense, with the breach, if another breach happens with another application that you're using, they take that information and then they sell it on the dark web. People buy that information and they try to reuse and connect to, say, one of the big shopping stores that you would go to. And they would try to connect with that password because a lot of people use their password over and over again. If they connect to it, they can get into your system and they can probably use your credit card information and buy things So it's very important to know that. So if you can turn on multi-factor authentication, two-step verification with all the applications that you have, that would lessen your risk by a lot, because passwords can be compromised if you have those two. So what would happen is I would log in to a system, and then if I had two-step verification or multi-factor authentication, it would either send, say, a 4-digit or 6-digit number to my phone, which is something I have and something I know, or it would ask for a two-step verification like some of the banks are doing, where it would say, you know, what's your uncle's middle name, or what was the street address that you lived on? And we're going to talk a little about that information, because we're going to talk about that in social media. So that's why you want to add multi-factor authentication and two-step verification to every application you have. If you get a phone call out of the blue, don't give away any information. If you think it's real and you're worried, right? If you're worried at all, even a little bit, what you would just say is be polite, say this, I'll call you back. Go hang up. Go directly to find that number on the website and recall them about the inquiry and see if it's real. A lot of fraud has happened over the phone, and so very important. If you're feeling uncomfortable, a phone call that you got, you don't need to tell them anything. In fact, I would ask you not to say anything, give them any information when you're on the phone. Typically, the banks will not do that unless you have called them. So very important, you call them and use the direct number that you use, because it could say one of the banks on your phone when you see when you read it, it looks like it's one of the banks, but it may not be. So very important to do that. This goes for emails and texts also. Don't click on or open emails that are either suspicious or you don't recognize. Delete them right away. Don't wait. What happens sometimes is they'll go, okay, I'm not sure, it doesn't feel right, and then they go, oh, you know what? They feel better that next day, and they open it up. They click on a link, and then they expose themselves from downloading the malware. As we talked about, malware is like a virus, and it will, go into your system, and people could take over your system and go from there. So really important to delete anything that you get that you don't feel comfortable with. If you think that it's something real, again, you have an option to go directly to that website and figure out who you're supposed to connect to and see if it's real. On your devices like phones and laptops and et cetera, make sure you're updating your software, especially your software patches. And when a patch comes out for one of those devices, it's typically for security reasons. So make sure that you're updating your software all the time, because there's usually security patches that are in those updates. We talked about multi-factor, but multi-factor on your devices would be great. If some of the devices of phones today, they have able to look at your face, or they're able to use your finger to be able to connect to it. So great to be able to use a combination of things. It's very difficult for people to have both things, both your password and that. Installing anti-malware and virus software, very important. Make sure you have that on your systems. The next one is when connecting to a public Wi-Fi, don't connect to, say, your bank or your credit card to pay for something, say, on one of the big box stores kind of thing, because on public Wi-Fi, it's simply not a safe place to do those types of transactions. So just be aware that you want to just go surfing, you want to just kind of surf the internet, you want to look around for things, but don't do anything that could possibly be compromised, because they're often on public Wi-Fi. There are people that are looking for the opportunity to see what you're doing, and you may not be aware of that. Social media. Don't allow strangers to connect to your social media accounts. As an example, when you have somebody that says, hey, I'd like to be your friend, say on Facebook or LinkedIn, I want to connect with you, and you don't know who they are, I would say delete it. And so I know some people want to connect and they want to build business or marketing, but if you're not in that game, just remember that the person that's sending you that may not be the actual person in that request. They may be wanting to get more information on you, to build some information on you, to get to know different things, like, are you revealing some of those, your mother's maiden name or your pet's name or your uncle's middle name? Are you revealing that kind of information to expose you for some of those common security questions that would be found in two-step verification? So very important, personal information, try not to share it on social media. back up your data. It's important to back up your data because if you ever did get compromised on your computer or your systems, then what you want to be able to do is be able to recover that. So take that back up and make sure that it's not connected to your systems. Take it offline, and that way you have a copy if anything happened. And it's not even just for like being like having a cyber breach. It could be like your system just dies and the hard drive that you have doesn't work anymore. So at least you have, let's say, all those pictures or your financial information that you've been saving for a while. You have it in a storage device offline. They're not too expensive these days, so you definitely have a lot of options. If you feel you've been compromised along any way of any time, not just to do with the TransLink, unfortunate incident, make sure you call the institutions that you feel are very important to you, such as banks, the credit card, people, could be Visa, MasterCard, whoever you're using, and anything else that you feel you could be compromised on. And again, if you feel like you've been compromised, then you got to kind of go back to A, where the first one, to talk about your passwords. Make sure you start changing all your passwords and going through all of the things I talked about today. The other thing was making sure your devices are logged off automatically. So sometimes our computers or our phones, we don't have the ability, we don't have them turn off automatically. So, leave them for, say, I have a short setting on mine. It's probably a minute. And sometimes it annoys people if you only have a minute, but at least you have something that automatically, say you set it for 5 minutes, at least it locks off, and then somebody would have a difficulty getting in if you had, a password or you have some type of multi-authentication into those devices. Now, we talked about credit checks and dark web monitoring. Please take advantage of this because I think it's just one of the great starts for you to make sure that nothing could have happened to you. It basically monitors your finances and your credit, and it'll give you any updates. As an example, I've had it in the past where where my credit changed and I wasn't really sure why. And so at least I went in and looked, and it was nothing fraudulent, but it showed up right away when the banks changed my credit score. But it could have been somebody actually changing the address for my bank or my address, or it could have been somebody trying to start maybe another credit card with another bank, and the bank would pick that up and then send it to the credit monitoring people. And at least you would know that something is happening. You can deal with it right away. So hopefully this was all helpful. I hope nothing does happen, but please, please take a look at the last points and tips that I had, because they can certainly help you lessen your risk for the exposure that's going to continue to happen for many, many years unfortunately in the cyber industry. So thank you.
Thanks once again to Danny Timmins for taking the time to share his insights with us and to share those very helpful tips to help us protect ourselves. And I'd now like to invite Transit Police Chief Officer Dave Jones to share a few words. Over to you, Dave.
Thank you very much, Gigi. I'd like to take a very quick moment to echo the remarks that we just heard from Danny Timmins. With each passing day, it becomes more and more important for all of us to protect ourselves from cybercrime. The fact is, the nature of crime is changing. Across the globe, law enforcement agencies are finding that cybercrime is exceeding physical crime. As individuals, we need to be vigilant and take steps to protect ourselves as much as possible, such as those that Danny just outlined. One of the key steps that we have already shared with you is signing up for credit monitoring. We will now hear from Timothy Walsh, the Vice President of Breach and Cyber Risk Solutions at TransUnion. Timothy will discuss the features and benefits of the TransUnion Credit Monitoring Service package that TransLink is providing to all individuals whose sensitive personal information was compromised as a result of this incident. We will now share a pre-recorded video from Timothy.
Thank you for that introduction. From a TransUnion perspective, we assist organizations with developing a response strategy when responding to a data security incident. The core of that solution is our MyTridentity platform. MyTridentity enables consumers to monitor their credit file and gives them a hands-on approach to being notified of any changes within that credit file in real time. As I mentioned, the core of that service is triggering any change to the credit file. A change can consist of something as simple as an interest rate change or an address update, or could be something like a new inquiry. So applying for a credit card or a loan. We then pair that with giving the consumer access to their credit report and their credit score. A credit report is a snapshot of a consumer's financial history and primary tool leveraged for determining credit-related identity theft or fraud. It retroactively allows you, the consumer, to look back 7 years to get that financial snapshot. And a credit score is a three-digit number that's calculated based on the information contained in a consumer's credit file or credit report at any particular time. This is a score that enables a lender to get an overall snapshot of that credit report. From an identity theft prevention standpoint, we enable the consumer to get unlimited access to online educational resources concerning credit management, fraud victim assistance, and identity theft prevention. From a high level, any credit-related remediation that is required, we encourage you to contact our call center and speak to one of our fraud victim specialists that can assist with that remediation of any potential damages that are credit-related. From a monetary standpoint, we enable the consumer to access identity theft insurance of up to $50,000 worth of coverage, protecting against court cost, legal fees, child or elderly care benefits, to support, again, that remediation. From a dark web monitoring standpoint, we enable a consumer to monitor their identity, financial, or personal information on the surface, social, deep, and dark websites. This is an early warning sign of things to come from a credit perspective. Ultimately, fraudsters are looking to sell or trade data that they're able to capture on the dark web. And so monitoring this information or the selling of trading of this information on the dark web enables the consumer to have an early warning sign of things to come from a credit perspective. Now, we were asked some questions from your team regarding the general use of the solution, but also more specifically, the identity theft insurance. So we typically see a very low claim rate through our underwriter AIG insurance. And that's because the whole point of credit monitoring is to prevent fraudulent activity from having to go to remediation. Our solution, as mentioned, gives you, the consumer, the ability to monitor your credit and triggers changes, whether it be fraudulent or accurate information, to the credit file. By monitoring this information diligently, it best positions you, the consumer, to identify fraud and eliminate the need for potential remediation down the road. From a dark web monitoring standpoint, we highly encourage you to leverage this feature, as I'd mentioned, due to the early warning sign that it's able to support you, the consumer. We leverage a third party called 4IQ for this information, and we go through stringent information security requirements for all of our service providers. We constantly audit their hiring process, the management of their data, and their overall processes to make sure they're ultimately protecting you, the end consumer. As an alternative to MyTridentity, we also enable consumers to sign up for fraud alerts, which is essentially a trigger that will notify lenders to take extra due diligence and caution when accessing a credit file. This can be placed on your credit file for free by visiting ocs.transunion.ca. One of the questions, and the final question that we were asked, was regarding joint bank accounts and the potential access of a joint bank account by attackers. Now, ultimately, we believe the risk of this data is very low. It is one single attribute that is potentially being accessed by a fraudster, and in theory, should have very little risk to a spouse. Thank you so much for your time today, and have a great day.
Thank you so much, Timothy, for taking the time to share with us your tips. And also the key features of TransUnion's credit monitoring service. So if you haven't done so already, I strongly recommend that you sign up for the TransUnion credit monitoring service if you received a notification letter. Your letter will contain your unique code to register, and I've signed up myself, and I'm already getting regular updates from TransUnion. And as a reminder, if you are among the employees who signed up for credit monitoring before the letter was sent to you, you do not need to re-register. This service is an important tool to help us prevent identity theft and fraud. And I think it's clear that none of us wanted this to happen, as many of us have been directly affected, including those speaking to you on the call today. Now, before we start the Q&As, I'd like to take a moment to thank the unions who have been doing what they can to help share information and also to represent their members' interests. And I would also like to thank all of you. We apologize for the impact that this cyber attack has had on you. And we thank you for your questions, for your patience, and for taking the time to join us today. Now we're going to move into the final portion of today's program, the Q&A session. And to help facilitate the Q&As, I would like to turn things over to Jill Drews from TransLink's communications team, who will read your questions and direct them to the appropriate member of our senior leadership team. So over to you, Jill.
Thanks, Gigi, and good evening, everyone. As a reminder, all of these questions were submitted in advance of today's call by current and former employees, as well as retirees. I'll read out each question and then direct it to the person who's best suited to answer it. So on the call today, we have TransLink's interim CEO, Gigi Chen Kuo, TransLink's interim general counsel and corporate secretary, Jennifer Breeze, TransLink's vice president of human resources, Annabelle Donovan, as well as TransLink's chief information officer, Kurt Pregler. So I'd ask you already all do have your video on, so that's great. Let's get started with the questions. So our first question will go to Kurt. We're talking about how or why personal information is stolen. So why would someone steal my personal information and what could they do with it?
Yeah, thanks, Jill. The short answer is really to sell it and make some money. It's all about financial gain for these criminals. They'll often steal personal information such as social insurance numbers, dates of birth, other information in the hopes that other criminals will buy that information from them on the dark web. You may be wondering what the dark web is. Well, dark web is an unregulated part of the internet that isn't accessible to people using normal internet browsers or through a search engine, the type of things that you and I use on a regular basis. It's actually where criminals go to exchange information to conduct these illegal activities. And then what happens is that a criminal may buy someone's private information to commit a fraud by opening up a credit card or making an online purchase, maybe even taking out a loan in that individual's name. So, as was previously mentioned here today, dark web monitoring is an option you can opt into through the credit monitoring service that TransUnion is offering to us. It will alert you if criminals are exchanging your personal information on the dark web, so you can take further action to prevent your information from being misused. For instance, you may learn that your email address or an account number has been found on the dark web, in which case you can then go and update the password you used to log into that account and change it to something that's new, unique, or complex, like Danny mentioned to us earlier today. So, that's kind of the way that they use this information and what they can do with it. So back to you, Jill. Thank you.
Thanks, Kurt. This question's for Jennifer. Why are we only receiving 2 years of credit monitoring?
Thanks, Jill, for that question. So the industry standard for credit monitoring is for a period of 1 to 2 years in this, depending on the circumstances of the breach. In this instance, TransLink's offered 2 years of credit monitoring, and that services through TransUnion. If you have received a letter or we've offered you credit monitoring, we do strongly urge that you sign up for that if you haven't done so already.
Thanks, Jennifer. Our next question comes to Gigi. Gigi, why did it take so long to offer credit monitoring and fraud protection to the retired and former employees?
That's a good question, Jill. So as I mentioned earlier, the investigation is still ongoing and we're learning more as the investigation progresses. So at the end of December, we found out that the current employees of TransLink, Coast Mountain Bus Company, and Transit Police were impacted. But it wasn't until recently that we realized current employees of BCRTC and West Coast Express, as well as some former employees and retirees, were also impacted. So that's why there has been a difference in the timing.
Okay, this question is for Jennifer. Jennifer, how do you define what is considered sensitive personal information?
So this may sound a bit odd, but information such as your name, job title, any kind of information you'd normally find on a business card would not be considered personal information under privacy laws. Something like your phone number may be considered personal information, but there's no real risk of significant harm to an individual if that's the only piece of information that's been compromised. So it's not typically considered sensitive personal information. Sensitive personal information in the context of a cyber breach is information about an identifiable person that could cause significant harm to that individual if that information was accessed. For example, identity theft or fraud. So social insurance number would be an example of sensitive personal information, as it could pose a genuine risk of harm to that person if it was compromised. So that would be considered sensitive.
All right. So some of you may have noticed that your letter is different from your coworker's letter. So Annabelle, can you tell us why would more of my information be compromised than say that of my coworkers?
Sure, Jill, I can, and thanks, and good evening, everybody. So one of the key folders that was accessed was a working and restricted payroll file. And so this is not the same thing as our PeopleSoft server, which actually contains our data and is used for storage purposes. This is a particular folder that's made up of subfolders and files, all of which are created for different working purposes. For example, one might have information about calculations that are required to change somebody's vacation, while another might have information about data that's needed to reconcile information on a T4. That's why each of the information, or that's why the information as it relates to you individually may be different. And that's also why you would receive a personalized letter setting out exactly which information was accessed in relation to you.
Thanks, and we'll keep you in the hot seat, Annabelle. What about banking information? Is it a good idea to change that right now?
Well, that's a question that we've understandably been hearing a lot. Really, whether you change banking information or not is up to you. And I do encourage you to have a conversation with your bank about that. Now, when you talk to your bank, please let them know that TransLink does not maintain information about your banking account PIN number or your passwords. Notwithstanding that, if you want to change your banking information and you're a retiree and you want to change it in relation to pension administration, then please contact the Public Service Pension Plan. You have the option to either update your information through My Account or to complete and submit a direct deposit form. You can go directly to the pension plan website and they will have information there for you. Just search Managing My Banking Information for details, or you can just contact the Public Service Pension Plan directly. You will need to have specific information like your person ID. They'll be using that to verify your identity. Now, if you are an employee of TransLink, Transit Police, or CNBC and you'd like to make a change, you need to send your direct deposit information to pay.inquiries@translink.ca. So you'll need to complete the direct deposit enrollment form, and protections are in place to confirm your identity. Now, if you're an employee of BCRTC or West Coast Express, you will need to email payroll@bcrtc.bc.ca. And again, protections are in place to verify your identity.
Okay, and it's pretty understandable there'd be a lot of HR related questions here. So we've got another one for you, Annabelle. Why does TransLink retain employee personal information on file for as long as they do after employees have left?
Sure, thanks. So TransLink has legal and operational requirements to retain personal information of former and retired employees for purposes like pension and benefit information and tax information. So for example, a retired employee's file is retained for 7 calendar years after an employee has passed away. So you can see that the time required may be significant.
All right. We'll keep Annabelle where she is for now. Let's talk about that sensitive personal information. Why wasn't it protected? Why wasn't all of our sensitive personal information protected?
Well, actually, Jill, thanks for the opportunity to circle back on that question, because the fact is that the information was protected. The information was in a restricted file. And what that means is that only the employees who need that information for business purposes can access it. And their identity is closely monitored to make sure those restrictions are firm. Now, I want to touch a little bit on encryption because Kurt mentioned that earlier, and many of you have asked about that. Encryption, as he mentioned, is one method of protecting information. But what's important here is that due to the way this cyber attack was executed, data encryption would not have prevented the attackers from accessing this information. So all of that said, part of the investigation and remediation efforts include looking for any opportunities to further strengthen and improve physical and technical security measures. And Kurt has already listed some of the things underway to do that.
Great. We'll move over to Gigi now. We have one for you. So can you tell us, what are the impacts on spouses and dependents? What are you doing for them?
So as our investigation continues, spouses and dependents whose sensitive personal information was unlawfully accessed will get their own individual notification letters and will be offered credit monitoring as appropriate. Now, if your spouse didn't receive a notification letter, but you are concerned about your joint bank account, we encourage you to speak to your bank about this.
Okay, and speaking about those letters, there's a chance you may not have everyone's current mailing address. If you don't have mine, how can I update it? And how do I confirm if I was compromised in the hack? Maybe we'll throw that to Annabelle as well.
Sure, thank you. So if you're a current employee and your address requires updating, maybe because the information you received on a recent pay advice wasn't correct, or because you've moved in the last 18 months, you can provide updated address information by emailing employee.benefits@translink.ca. If you're a former employee or a retiree, please contact the TransLink Incident Response Center to update your address. And whether you're a current employee, a former employee, or a retiree, please contact that same location, the TransLink Incident Response Center, if you're curious about whether or not your information has been compromised, because they have a list of all of those who've received a letter, so they can confirm that for you.
Thanks. So once you receive that letter, you're looking at signing up for some credit monitoring. And Jennifer, I'll throw this one to you. Why did TransLink decide to use TransUnion as opposed to both TransUnion and Equifax?
Thanks, Jill. This question's actually come up to us a few times as well. So Equifax and TransUnion are both credit monitoring agencies, and they do provide very similar services. So having a subscription to both services isn't necessary. Both agencies receive reports and updates from financial institutions relating to an individual's credit file. They also both offer fraud alert services, which encourages creditors and lenders to take extra steps to verify your identity before they'll grant new credit. The credit monitoring and fraud protection services that TransLink's offering, as we've talked about, is through TransUnion. And Timothy walked through some of that. And as he mentioned, it's called My True Identity. All that said, although you may have signed up for credit monitoring services already through another agency, we still strongly encourage you to sign up for the services that TransLink's offering through TransUnion if you did receive a letter for us or we've offered you credit monitoring.
Great. Okay, that brings us to our last question. This one's for Annabelle as well. So will TransLink be providing some mental health support, such as access to the Employee and Family Assistance Program for the retired members and their spouses? This situation could definitely have some negative impacts on people's mental health, especially for people already feeling isolated during the pandemic.
Jill, that's a wonderful question. And I just want to start by saying we really appreciate how distressing this could be. We are very interested in providing any support we can, and this particular suggestion is actually actively being looked into as we speak. So I would really invite you to keep an eye on the website, and we will be providing more information about that as we're able to do so.
Thank you very much, Annabelle. So that is the end of time we have for our Q&A section. I want to thank Annabelle, Gigi, Kurt, and Jennifer for answering your questions and my questions. I'll now pass things back over to Gigi for some closing remarks.
Great, thank you, Jill. So as we wrap up this call, I want to thank you for joining us today and for submitting your thoughtful questions in advance. We've recorded this session today and we'll be posting the video tomorrow on our website at translink.ca/cyber incident. Please feel free to forward this link to others who may have wanted to join one of the sessions today, but were not able to do so. We'll also be posting the detailed frequently asked questions on that website, as well as the employee SharePoint sites. For those of you who've received individual notification letters, we are also committed to writing to you at the conclusion of our detailed investigation so that we can give you a final update on this incident. Thank you once again for joining us today.